Good afternoon. Gonna have din shortly. It's not dinner. What am I about? It's lunch. It's a bit confusing actually when you use that phrase because from where I was brought up, the meal that you have at 6 o'clock was always called my tea, which always confused me because obviously during the day you drink cups of tea. How does that one work? So I get really confused sometimes when referencing the thing they eat between 12 and 1. Is that lunch or dinner? I think it's lunch. And then your dinner is supposed to have at 6, but I still call it tea. So it's a bit confusing, so whatever. Anyway, today I'm going to talk about, I thought if I'm going to do the soundtrack of my life, I had to then try and think back to, and I don't have to think back that long. Sorry, I don't have to think back that long. It does go back a hell of a long way, because I've already known this. Because from a very early age, I've always remembered this song, and so that's where it starts off. The soundtrack of my life was actually the first song I ever remember, and I'm not referencing like nursery rhymes, which I do remember, or lullabies that my mother sang to me when she was. I remember some of those, and of course your Christmas songs. I'm thinking about a song that stood out at the time and is your earliest memory of a particular song, and that song was by Nancy Sinatra, called "These Boots Are Made for Walking," and I had to just check when that was actually released. I was quite astounded. It got released in December 1965. It became #1 in both America and Britain, and I would have heard it February 1966, and at that time I was 3.5 and a bit, like 3 years and 7 months at that point, or maybe 8 months, because I turned 4 in July of 1966. So I'm going back 56 years, which is even more, 56 and a bit years. And the reason why it stood out for me is because of having a child's imagination at that time. And when Nancy Sinatra, and she didn't really write her own material, it was written by a guy called Hazlewood, and he did a lot of songs subsequently with Nancy Sinatra. And he did a lot. I don't think he's alive anymore. They did like a few albums together, and I think he died not that long ago. And Nancy Sinatra, bizarrely, is still alive, and yes, it's and she is the daughter of Frank Sinatra, bizarrely. But yeah. So getting back to the actual memory, the actual lyrics of "These boots are made for walking. They're going to walk all over you. One of these days, these boots are going to walk all over you." That's what it was. As a child, I just imagined these huge, massive boots with no legs in them, on their own, walking over somebody. And actually, even though I still hear that song years later, it's the same image that I get when I was 3/3 or whatever. And I can actually remember where I heard the song. I was in the kitchen, which had the only radio that we had as a family. I lived in a place called, it was a bungalow in Dunkirk Drive in Ellesmere Port. I think my brother might have been about, I think he just turned 2. So we were still quite young. And I remember my mum was making our dinner. There goes dinner. Is it our lunch? Right. My mum was making the thing that you eat between 12 and 1. And she was making that. And I was sitting on like a kitchen unit, I think it was, and I think the bread bin was to the left, and the cooker was there, and the radio was there, and this goes back to a wonderful time, when there wasn't something called Radio 1. Yes, Radio 1 hadn't even been invented yet, and that never came out till the following year in 1967. Instead, back then, if you wanted to listen to popular music, and at that time, 62, 63, right through to 67 was a fantastic time to listen to popular music in this country, especially, you had to listen to a pirate radio. Now, for those who don't know what a pirate radio station was, no, it isn't, Blackbeard, DJ Blackbeard. This was a way of getting around having to pay broadcasting fees or whatever. So basically there were these boats moored outside British area waters, and they were permanently anchored there. And the DJs used to go out and spend maybe a week on the boat, what have you, with a big transmitter at the top. And they used to go there with a bunch of records, and they used to get a little boat out there, and they used to transmit from these various boats moored around different parts of England. And they reached near enough the whole of the British Isles. And the radio station was called Radio Caroline. And that's what my mum and dad listened to. That's what everybody listened to back then, was pirate radio, Radio Caroline. And on Radio Caroline, you got all the music of the day. And so they listened to Caroline. And when I say I actually wish we were back in the days where there wasn't a Radio 1, because I don't know if anybody's listened to Radio 1 recently. But yes, I don't know how to describe this, but it seems to be a station playing things which purport to be songs by people who say they're actually musicians, which is bizarre, because if you actually gave them a musical instrument and said, there's a guitar, any chance you could just write a tune on the spot, they wouldn't know what to do. If you gave them a piano and just say, do you want to just construct a melody on the piano, no chance either. Because of course these guys who are selling records or downloads in their millions and are fabulously wealthy cannot even play a musical instrument. So how is it that they call themselves musicians? I have a friend, for instance, who is reasonably successful, but he hasn't given up the day job of driving the school bus yet. And yet he used to tell me his royalty checks used to come in sometimes, maybe 500 quid here, 500 quid there, and he has loads of downloads you can get and what have you, but he cannot play a musical instrument, and yet he calls himself a musician. How does that work? Can you call yourself a footballer if you can't kick a football? Can you call yourself a joiner if you can't use, a plane? I could just go on and on here. Can you call yourself a doctor when, well, in fact, there's some DJs are called doctor, so maybe you can do it. It's bizarre. So this is a frustration I have with the stuff on Radio 1. It's now been taken over by a bunch of guys and girls who even their voices are computer generated to take out all the bits of where they sing off key, and all the music is sampled, all the sounds are sampled from other people. You get you just go in and that's what they do, and they produce it. And I'm not against dance music, to be honest with you, because there's some really good, I like dance music when it's got things in it like maybe a verse or maybe a chorus or a good bit of a little bit of keyboard which you can sort of hum along to, which has got that sort of go through. I've seen a band called Faithless a couple of times. They produce dance music, anthemic dance music, but at least with Faithless they all play their own instruments, and they do have the guy who goes rapping through it, but they have people who play the instruments. The same with Groove Armada, they do dance music. I love that, but these guys who just literally it's just a bunch of computers, and I'm going, I don't get it. And yet these guys are fabulously wealthy, successful, and you get people like me who've been trying to try hard to write songs which have things in it called a bridge, and a chorus, and verses, and an instrumental break, and interesting things happen, and some sing-along at the end, some sort of magnificent, crowd moment that can happen in the songs. And they don't get played at all, and yet there's some guy on his computer just doing this, all of a sudden is, it's successful. It's bizarre, So I don't listen to Radio 1, I haven't listened to Radio 1. I used to listen to Radio 1 back in the good old days in the early 90s, but I don't listen to Radio 1 anymore, I haven't for years. And I even struggle to listen to Radio 2 these days, because unfortunately Radio 2 is getting infested with that sort of music these days. And when I go out driving, when I'm driving for 9 hours after loading a van for an hour, I just have my iPad there, I connect to it Bluetooth, and I just play all my music, which actually is, well, not the songs that I've written, obviously, well, there are a few there, but you know, it's all like the people that I like and people I get introduced to so I can get into them, and it's probably the only thing which makes doing that job worthwhile. So, anyway, well, that was a rant. Let's go back to 1966. So basically that stuck with me, you know, a lot, and it's the first song I ever remember. And I'd like to show you that I bought it, but of course I was three and three quarters. I could afford records then, and so I don't actually own that song anyway. It's a good song, but the best thing of it recently, I only just watched last night when I was trying to find the actual record sleeve. I found the video that went along with the song, and for like 1966, or maybe the video was made at the end of 1965, my god, it is a little bit raunchy. So I'm going to put that link in the description for anybody who'd like to watch, you know, the fashion of the end of 1965, beginning of 1966. And yeah, it's a bit raunchy for its time, but hey ho, who doesn't mind a little bit of raunchiness when it's a little bit more innocent in the mid-60s. So anyway, I'm going to leave that with you. Hope you can click on to the link if you'd like to see the video for These Boots Are Made of Walkin. And I think the video count, when I saw last night, it was staggering. It was like so many millions of plays. It's amazing. So hopefully a few more plays from the link in the description for the first song that I ever remember that stuck in my mind in the soundtrack of my life. So there you go. See you later. Bye bye. I'm going off to make lunch or dinner, whatever you call it. Bye bye.